notified and the public hearing will take place at the county commission level.
But they have not signed the petition to amend the subdivision, right?
No, so at first is amending the subdivision, if that'll go through.
How many lots are in the subdivision?
Just the two.
Two.
So just those 2 lots constitute the whole subdivision?
Yes.
So this one by Cook and Post, they're not in the subdivision at
No.
all?
No.
Okay.
So they originally a year ago,
Yeah,
or
it
2 years
used to
ago?
be- It was one parcel of land just till, like say, a year or two ago. Then I came in and split it into 2. I guess now I'm back, combining it back to 1, so.
So it's going to the one parcel so we can meet the 3-acre minimum requirement for a commercial zone.
Hey, I have a question.
Mhm.
It looks like the corner that's in Wellington, does that affect us at all? I mean, how?
So
would
he's just outside of Wellington, so the boundaries are a little bit off. So his parcels are just starting on the outside of Wellington. And the plat, the end of his property is Wellington city limits.
Oh, okay.
So one thing that I've placed a call to Wellington City is they had an approval from Wellington City for 2 connections.
Yes.
My question to Wellington City that I haven't had answered yet is, with it going to potentially commercial, does Wellington City have different requirements for water and sewer connections going to commercial compared to what was approved as residential? But that's because they're getting their water and sewer from Wellington City, so we'll have to work on those details later, but that's one thing I haven't got an answer on that is still kind of pending. So you're going from 2 to connections to 1, but
So can we approve it without that being answered?
I believe the amendment can be approved.
Contingent upon having proper sewer and water connections? for a
and-
commercial
Well, you
zone?
mean the amendment to the subdivision itself, just item number 8 alone, right?
Yes,
So, okay, and then I guess, Mr. Chairman, your question is that a problem though to approving the zone change, right?
Correct.
My thought would be, again, a zone change is a legislative decision. So you're looking less at, when you're looking at a zone change, you can look at just about anything, but it's less focused on the particular use than, I guess my advice would be you're looking less at the particular use than you are at whether that zone is, in general, is consistent with the surrounding area and the general plan. So you could consider that, but remember, you do not, your standard on a zone change is reasonably. So
That answers it, and then it's upon him to make the satisfactory things to get those connections.
right, yeah. Typically, I think what's historically been done is you would say, well, we're not going to scrutinize your particular use excessively until we get to the conditional use or building permit stage. What we're going to look at primarily when we're talking a zone changes is a commercial use. Would it be detrimental to that area? Would it be consistent with the area generally? But on the other hand, knowing what you know about the intended use, I think you may also take that into account as well. So you can look at it all, but I think typically when you're making a legislative decision, you're looking at kind of long term. What if the intended use doesn't pan out? What if a different commercial use comes in?
And where we haven't received any response from Wellington, I'll withdraw my concerns or questions on that then, because it sounds like we're okay to do the zone change.
I think so.
Christian, doesn't the planning commission need to hold a public hearing on that zone change, or is that the commission,
The county commission would still need to do this. So this is just a recommendation to the county commission. And the county commission will hold a public hearing on the zone change. So tonight you're just making a recommendation to the county commission.
Okay, but I guess my question is, I thought state law said that the planning commission needed to hold public hearing and it was optional whether the county commission.
That's if you're amending your, that's when you're amending an ordinance. So if you're amending one of your if you're amending a land use ordinance, then that has, like the development code, then you do have to have the public hearing at this level. But if you're simply making a zone change, a change to the general plan, then that's always been done at the county commission level. The public hearing has. So we've never had a public hearing for a zone change in front of the planning commission.
Okay.
And it's not required by statute.
Everybody's quiet again. Would someone feel comfortable making a motion on item 8 for Mr. Callahan?
I'll make a motion.
Motion to approve and recommend this to the Carbon County Commissioners. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Is there a second to that?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Your next item is review and possible approval for a recommendation to the Carbon County Commission of a zone change for Country Crossing. You want to tell us what you're doing there?
So that's the same, so that's the same,
This is just a zone change for this property.
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the zone change. So the first one, I guess, was combining the two lots into
Yeah.
one.
First one was amending the subdivision. Then now it's the recommendation for approval for a zone change.
Again, talk to me, guys. I think we've talked enough with Mr. Callahan on this to know what he's doing there. Do you know what you're doing there?
We have a plan, but
My only concerns with the property would be water and sewer. Obviously, it was approved as residential, and whether or not the capacity is there to run a commercial business of any sort. I assume it's probably fine, considering that, Todd, I think you said across the street there's industrial properties.
It's zoned industrial
Okay, so there's no-
on the back side, so there's not necessarily businesses right there. I mean, there's other houses through there, but the water comes from Wellington. So just knowing that they approved 2 residential, and this is what, when they come in for the possible business, is when we can get into the details of the sewer and the water and capacity and all of that. But my assumption, if they can provide 2 residential connections, that there would be the capacity to, because he's not doing a large scale business.
There'd probably be much less use with the one building than even one house, let alone 2, so.
Yeah, they have a big 8-inch main line out there, the water line and the sewer line. As long as they make grade, they have a big enough sewer line too.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. I was in touch with them today of like requirements for the sewer and the disposal of, there'll be some stuff that needs to go into effect, with the possible sampling manhole and some other things that need to happen, but details, I guess, with the sewer, so.
Okay, what do we want to do, guys?
A motion to approve it.
There's been a motion to approve the zone change for Mr. Callahan.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
And Kevin, can next time we get the subdivision without 2 CCs in there? We got Country Corner, we got Country Cossin, Country Cousins, Callahan Construction. You're confusing us.
Mr. Chairman, I need to be excused at this time. I have an emergency that I have to take care of, so I apologize for leaving early.
Okay, so we'll alter your changes on these.
My changes on the...
Yeah, no,
think Todd has them all.
They're on the printer, so I'm going to go grab them.
have a good evening.
Sorry, guys. Thanks.
Okay, the next item we have is where we're updating the codes, the review and possible recommendation for proposed amendments to section 9 definitions for the Carbon County Code. And you'll notice, and I think you've all reviewed it, items have been outlined in yellow where changes are being made. Has everyone had a chance to review those in section 9, and do we need to make any other changes? And do you want to go through these one by one, or how would you like to handle it, Todd?
You walked out.
Gonna put a leash on you.
I know. Well, I got with Christian at about 4:27, and he had a couple minor changes, so then I had to hurry and reprint them. So in section 9, there was, last time we had a discussion, and I can hand out these. Okay. So here's the latest and greatest, hopefully. Okay. So we had our public hearing last month on section 9, and I was asked to change a couple of items. One of those items was on page 4, line 186. Change it from a lawful fence to, say, livestock fence, because that's really what we're defining. Then on page 5, line 242, home occupation, changed it to where it says conducted within a dwelling and carried on by persons residing in the dwelling, and then that new verbiage we added. So I just tweaked that slightly. Then the last change was the in the warehouse on page 12. We had a discussion of, it's on line 591, inflammable and flammable. And after our discussion, I looked it up in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and inflammable and flammable by definition are the same. But I agree with the Planning Commission, it's confusing having it say inflammable, so I just deleted it. It says, materials that are flammable or explosive. So those are the minor changes I made to section 9 after our public hearing and comments from the Planning Commission.
Is anyone else seeing anything they want to have changed or have a concern with?
I didn't have any further concerns, Mr. Chairman.
Just a question.
Yes.
How do you administer, on page 3, line 128, cage or pen for confining poultry? What about people that have got the pigeons?
I would think that pigeons would kind of fall under the same.
Yeah, so you think it'll cover it okay there?
I would think
Will you
so.
enforce it that way?
We can put, rather than poultry, we can put fowl,
Yeah.
and then we cover all birds. I mean, these are we're gonna, with the hope of at least once a year, going through and finding the little nuances that we've missed and realize that now somebody is considering this and we had no idea that they wanted to.
And what brought it to mind was, in your neighborhood, there was a complaint of pigeons annoying the neighbors, and when I saw a coop, I thought maybe they ought to.
So I can change poultry to fowl, and that way we can cover anything.
So are these ready to, with that little change, are these ready to go to the commission?
Yeah.
Need a recommendation to go to the county commission with these?
I'll make that recommendation with that one added change.
We got a second there?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. We recommend section 9 with the changes that were indicated. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item we have is to section 3, general requirements of Carbon County. Are you over your budget on paper, by the way?
We are now. So I also have asked the health department to come tonight because we had a discussion on water connection, water hauling, distances, and let me hand you one other document. So I guess to start, we'll get to the water rights. I guess we'll start with the beginning of section 3. Everything is the same all the way to, let's see, page 313. And this is where we left off last time, is our water rights. So in section 3.3.30, water connection / access requirement for a building permit. On line 617, we put parcels or building lots whose nearest property lines within 1,000 feet of a water distribution system shall connect to the water distribution system. And we had the discussion, I was bringing up the thought of eliminating the possibility of water hauling. And we had the discussion of, say, okay, we can, if you're within 1,000 feet, you have to connect to a water line. If you're more than that, you can still have a cistern or a spring. And so I was talking to the health department and some other counties and areas, they've had requirements on water haulage. And so they've been looking at possibly adopting some rules, and maybe we can have Scott and Kurt from the health department just seeing, here's what we see as far as the water hauling issues, or here's what other areas have done going forward. So that paper I just handed out just gives information of where water hauling would be possible. If the health department were to put some regulations in, here's some things that have been done in the past that we would have to comply with.
So what's your recommendation on that, Todd?
So I guess I wanted to bring this up because seeing if the health department puts in some rules and regulations, the people that have building permits would also be required to comply with those. So I guess I wanted to bring them up to your attention to see if we wanted to tweak it or just continue to leave it as it is. So I guess just to discuss the information the health department provided for me, or for us.
How much water hauling is done in our community, do we know?
We approved one last year, and I know there are several others that haul. I don't have an exact number. I guess where I'm looking at is if they're, I don't want it to get out of hand to where people don't connect because they don't want to pay fees. And we do have that 1,000 feet is what we talked about last time. But I'm concerned that if there's other areas that now they're 1,010 feet, they're going to haul water, and working with the health department on that.
Do you guys from the health department have any comments you want to make? I know your concern is the health, safety, and welfare of the users of that. Is that a problem with hauled water at all?
Sorry, I'm kind of new at this, so. I think that if they're within that 1,000 feet, it would save them a lot of money in the long run if they just hooked up, you know. And I know that they have the rights to do that, but it would increase property value. It would make it a lot less possible for them to get contaminated water. We see lots of issues with water systems when people don't take care of them in these situations, that they can get contaminated not knowing about it, and they have to re-sanitize their whole system. And things can happen pretty easy when it's not hooked up to the Prywide system, so.
Yeah, I'm Scott Hacking with State DEQ, so I'm with the state, and the state pretty much stays out of water hauling on to private residences. But I have worked with other local jurisdictions in Tri-County, and I've seen what they have done. And they have a problem with hauling to full-time residences that they were trying to curtail, which may be happening here. So they instituted their own rules under the health department to make water hauling a very last resort for full-time dwelling. You had to demonstrate that you couldn't drill a well, or that you couldn't connect to a public water system, or that you couldn't connect to a spring, even to the extent of trying to drill a well. And if you drilled a dry hole, or it was proven that in your area there were no water available, then the health department would allow you to haul water to a full-time residence. Of course, there's always seasonal cabins or 40-acre parcels that they did allow water hauling as per their rule. But in general, they wanted to discourage hauling to a full-time residence for a family. It's just not a great idea. It decreases property values. It's better if they can connect, if at all possible.
Have we had any issues in this area?
I personally know of 5 or 6 people that have cisterns that they're just barely outside the 1,000-foot limit, or 3,000-4,000 feet away from the line. But some of those people are a little bit impoverished, but in the long run, it would be cheaper for them to just hook up versus having to use all that gas and equipment to haul their water every week or two. So,
Are those full-time residents that
Yes.
you're mentioning?
Have you had any health issues from those folks?
I personally have not heard of any. I've only been here for a year at the health department, so, but even on full-time or public water systems, we see issues with contamination, stuff like that regularly. It's just when you have a separate system, it requires maintenance and requires vigilance, and usually people don't put too much thought into it. So
Okay.
things do happen.
Any other questions for these gentlemen from the panel? Todd, so what's your recommendation? To include these water hauling things, or just keep them on the back burner, or what's the?
So I want to at least bring it to the attention because there's the discussion I've had with the health department of possible them implementing rules. And I didn't know if the planning commission, from our discussion last month, we talked about the 1,000 feet, but it's something that I can see as a possible concern. And so to make you guys aware of other areas and what they've done, so that we're aware of it. Maybe right now it's not a major issue. I just can possibly see it becoming an issue if we get some more growth. So now, I'm fine now if we put it on the back burner, but I wanted to be able to have that discussion so we are aware of it going forward, to where if we need to, we can implement it, or if you guys want to implement these changes now, we can, but at least they're on the table and they're in the forefront of our discussions.
What do you guys think? Just my opinion is, I like what Todd just said, is to do the public hearing on Section 3 is it's been reviewed and sits now, and then put this on the back burner and maybe massage it a little bit so it fits in, and bring it back as a special amendment sometime later. Does that make sense? Talk to me.
I think that's fine. I'm kind of a mind to not rely upon cisterns and such for water uses, but I can see that, just reading this one-page document that Todd handed out on water hauling, that there are circumstances where that might be advisable. But I'm fine with the way that the current Chapter 3 reads.
So would you make the motion that we set this for public hearing as shown to us?
I'll make that motion that we send this to for a public hearing as presented.
there is a couple more updates in 3 that we didn't discuss last time, if you guys want to review those. Just a FYI.
Go over them and we'll just hold the second on that.
Okay, so on the let's see, where were we at? We're on page 13. So we added a little verbiage to temporary uses, which would allow me as the zoning administrator to approve those rather than having to come to planning commission. Deleted on page 315, deleted out the word county commission, where just the planning commission or the zoning administrator would do a site plan review of a building, of location, setbacks, and those things for major developments. Then on page 316, this is the major change I made to this section, is adopting off-street parking standards. So the reason this is before, all it said was the county commission by resolution may adopt regulation relating to off-street parking, and then has a few more sentences there, but we've never adopted anything. So my idea is, rather than saying the county commission may by resolution adopt it, let's put it in our code saying, here's what our standard is by off-street parking. And so I labeled those A through F, and then on page 317, gave a table saying a bank and a business needs to have 1 space for each 300 square feet of gross floor space, and goes down through a bunch of uses. The idea behind this is if we get a major development and they decide, say they're going to employ, their 10,000 square feet, and they say, we're only going to have 5 parking spots. And we say, well, no, by our code, you have this much square feet, you can at least provide this many parking spaces, so that they have adequate parking for their business. So this is, I looked at several other counties and cities that they're very similar. They're with, there's some of them that say, 250 square feet rather than 300 square feet. And ones for churches, it's 1 space for 3 seats versus some of them have 1 space for 3 seats. So, I mean, they're all within the same realm. So I want to bring that to your attention of that table.
So does this just have to do with commercial or just private as well?
So it would be anything, so it's mostly commercial, because your single family dwellings are going to fall under another aspect. So if you're coming in for development of a big business, if you did come in for a big apartment complex, then yes, it would fall under this. But if it's just, any John Doe is building the house, they don't have to follow the parking requirements. So commercial essentially and industrial.
So it shows dwellings, apartments, etc., and it says 2. So I'm assuming that's all dwellings.
So that's.
But again, off-street parking is just a piece of concrete that's 2
yes.
cars. Capacity for 2 cars.
So with a home coming in a subdivision and have a driveway, it's going to meet
a driveway that can park 2 cars, basically.
That's going to meet it. So everyone that comes in has a driveway. So I guess big subdivisions we would. I mean, they all do anyway. But
a question: have you thought about any means in which there may be some latitude to reduce the amount of required parking? I think in some circumstances. This might be more than enough parking, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you set the standard and then if you say by general consent or something that it can be overwritten.
So we can add in there, or maybe reduced as under the.
For example, if
land use authority.
If there's additional on-street parking or adjacent parking that can be used with an agreement, something to that effect.
That's a good point.
So you brought it up, Mike. Are you still happy making the motion that we set this for public hearing?
Yes, I think so, with just that added caveat that, that the off-street parking may be reduced in, I would say there's those two circumstances mentioned.
Okay.
Whether there's adjacent property that could be used for it, shared parking, I guess you could call it, or off-street or on-street parking.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend section 3 for a public hearing to be set with those changes. And did you get those, Todd?
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item we have is for section 6, subdivisions. And this one also need to have our review, and we'll need to possibly make that recommendation for a public hearing. And one thing, and I apologize to the newer members, if you'll notice, and this was done prior, there have been some changes, so this board handles more of the detail work, and it doesn't have to be by the county commission. So you'll see the county commission is lined out on a lot of these. So, and the site review committee, I notice on section 6 also. So there's things that have been going on that required those to be deleted. So that's going on. Other than that, what did you find in section 6?
So, if you remember, we had section 2 is kind of our structuring of our planning commission and what delegates the authority. So within section 2, we made it so that the planning commission was the land use authority, and so all subdivision approvals are through planning commission. Well, a caveat to that is section 6 has the specific language for subdivision. So we have to delete out the portions that say county commission will approve all subdivisions. For an example, how right now the amendment for Kevin's is going to county commission. That's because we haven't deleted them out of section 6. So Christian and I had a discussion. I said, well, no, planning commission just doesn't. He says, well, no, because in section 6 it specifically says county commission still, it has to go before them. So these changes in here are more or less deleting out county commission and giving you guys all the authority for approval of subdivisions. So that's where you can see, and also another thing is deleting or eliminating the site plan review committee. So for our new members, we had 2 processes. A subdivision that had 4 lots or more came to the county commission. Anything that was 3 or less went to a separate committee called our site plan review. And I foresee problems where people could come in and do like 1 and 2, 3 lot developments and can get under the radar and not have to do fire hydrants, paved roads, water connections, sewer connections, all these things where if we bring them to planning commission, if someone comes in and says, I'm doing a 2 lot, and then 6 months later, they're like, oh, I'm going to come and do another 2 lot. You're going to say, whoa, 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 you guys are trying to skirt the rules. You didn't address fire hydrants. You didn't address all these other things. You're going to have to do this if you're moving forward. So it gives one body and know what's going on, so we don't have a hodgepodge 1 and 2 lot that try to skirt all of our rules. So that's what this is basically gives you guys all the land use approval. So that's what we did on page 1, deleted site plan and county commission. Then just tweak some verbiage saying agricultural land waiver on page 1. And page 4 is where we take out the county commission takes action on final plat, where that will be your guys' final approval will be that all that's needed. And so we just go through all that and just tweaking the verbiage. Didn't know if anyone had any questions or if you wanted me to go through all the minor details of it.
No, I think it's pretty obvious what you did there by streamlining it.
Yeah.
Talk to me, guys, what do we want to do with section 6? Do we want to recommend that for public hearing as corrected?
I motion to pass it as it is.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. We pass section 6 off for a public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. The next item on our agenda are updates of things that have been going on and bring us up to date on some things by Mr. Thorne. And also I'd be interested to know how we're doing with conditional use permits and are we following up on those?
So I've sent a letter out to Basin Industries. So just a history, Basin Industry used to be located behind Tony Basso's dealership on Riverside Drive. We had concerns with them, a variety of concerns. They came in for a conditional use permit. We put a bunch of conditions on. They decided to move buildings. So they bought the old Renegade building on 4 Mile Hill. We did another conditional use permit saying here's the same, basically the same conditions. And one of those conditions was a site obscuring fence and to keep the junk and debris below the height of the fence. Well, they haven't put up the site obscuring fence. There's an existing fence. He just needs to somehow obscure, whether he slats it or puts in another fence, either way. And then all of his junk and material needs to be lowered so that it's not a huge pile that everyone can see. So we sent him that letter and they received it. He hasn't contacted me to complain yet, so I'm sure that's coming. He came in for a building permit for a new sign, so when we go out for that, I'll also talk to him in person. But I mentioned in the letter, if we don't hear from him, we're going to put him on the agenda for next month to bring him in and discuss his conditions. Just like maybe it's been a year and a half ago with J&B Recycling, we had the same problems. We eventually revoked J&B's conditional use permit because they wouldn't comply with their conditions. They had 2.5 years to comply with their conditions and they never did. So we just want Basin to, comply with the conditions that he agreed to that night, and I think it was either the October or November Planning Commission meeting. So that may be on the agenda for next month. As far as any other developments, trying to think off the top of my head, the one for Kevin that might be coming in, that's the next potential business that would come in for a CUP. Any questions for me?
Anybody got a question for Todd? If it goes wrong, it's Todd's fault, by the way.
Perfect.
So once we do a public hearing for sections 3 and 6, the next one we'll review is section 4. That's all of our zoning details. And there's just some formatting issues that we have. One thing that I want to have a discussion on is currently our commercial zone is 3 acres. And if we do something to commercial zone as approved, because we have some existing businesses that used to be commercial 50 years ago, but now have changed to residential, and people want them back to commercial, but they can't because it's 1 acre or it's 2 acres. And some of them are located along Carbonville Road, and it's like, you know what, I don't foresee an issue because, we have Grog's and the bowling alley, those other things, and if it was commercial at one point, but technically now it's too small, if we want to adjust that as a planning commission, saying, oh, you know what, let's do it as approved, and being a little more flexible with those commercial zones. So other than that, it's just minor changes to some of the zones and wording that will bring for your guys' review next month.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Todd, is there a reason why there's a minimum of 3 acres for a commercial property?
I don't know the history of it. It's always been that way. A lot of our development code was adopted in 1981, and there's been changes, but I think it's just was always 3 acres, so we've always kept it that. I think other areas have more flexibility because now you start have mixed use developments and a few other things that people are looking to do, which we're limited in offering. So I don't know why it was set at 3 acres, but I'll find the history.
So that, yeah, I would think that might be something to consider. I've worked with other communities, and oftentimes they don't have a minimum for resident or for commercial, and oftentimes they don't even have a minimum for industrial. The idea behind it is that the particular use will kind of designate what size of property they want for their business. But so if you could look into that, and if there's reason that we might be able to consider changing that, I think that would help businesses within the area.
So once we get done with section 4, there's our development agreement that's in section 7 that talks about bonding for subdivisions that I think is pretty good, and section 8 that talks about if someone from the public wants to amend the code, how they contact us and how they go about that. So we're basically come June, if we do a public hearing for section 4, this summer we'll be done with the code development updates. And the idea then is to once a year do one update, saying we're going to update these little sections, and do one update once a year of everything all at once, and we'll be done and move on. My hope is this summer to start on our general plan that hasn't been update or it was created in 1997. Mike had hair back then.
I did.
And he was 4 years old.
I was a little older than that.
Anything else anyone wants to bring before this board? Hearing nothing, would take a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
It's been moved that we adjourn. All those in favor, I need a second.
I'll second.
Been moved to second that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No wonder the county's in trouble. Spend all their money on paper.